and thank you for coming. We have a great presenter today, Mayumi Ishikawa, a valued colleague from Japan, from Osaka University. And she's going to talk to us about alternative transnational higher education in Malaysia. Before I introduce Mayumi, let me take you through the webinar protocols. Now, remember that the webinar is being recorded, so what you say in the Q&A will be immortalized on YouTube for all time. You can reach the recording on our YouTube channel, usually through our website within the next 48 hours or so. During the webinar, we advise you to keep muted. Extraneous noise can interrupt the webinar, and you don't need to use your camera, but when you come into the Q&A, and we very much welcome your presence in the Q&A, you then, of course, turn on your camera and turn on your mic. Now, to come into that discussion, send a message in the chat to everyone or to me saying that you've got a question and what that question is, or you have a statement and what that statement is. And then I'll be able to schedule you into the discussion, and I'll send you a little message before I'm about to invite you in on camera. When you are invited in, turn on your mic, most important, as I said before, and turn on your camera if you can, and then say who you are and where you are from, and then give us your question or your statement. Now, Mayumi. Mayumi is a professor of social anthropology and director of the planning unit at the Center for Global Initiatives at Osaka University in Japan. Her research interests include the globalization of higher education, ethnographic studies of universities, the internationalization of higher education, educational migration of students and scholars, higher education and science policy, world university rankings, and the emergence of hegemony in academia, power and the construction of knowledge with a focus on Japan, East and Southeast Asia. All issues of great interest to us, Mayumi, and your work on rankings in particular, because rankings is such a sexy topic, isn't it? Our students at Oxford often talk about your paper there, your papers there, but I think, you know, the higher education world deserves to know more about your scholarship in all areas. Let me hand over to you at this point.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And hi to everyone online. Okay, first let me share the slide.
Yes, we can see that.
Okay. Today the topic, okay, I cannot see it myself.
We've got a full screen view, so it looks perfect from.
Okay. And the topic I present today is titled Internationalizing the Plural Society, Alternative Transnational Higher Education in Malaysia. I am, as a matter of fact, here to present a study that is still preliminary. My first plan was to have a solid output about this time, but I think we all experienced this delay during the pandemic. My field work had to be postponed and postponed and postponed again. But now I would like to share my ideas and thinking at this stage to have your inputs and feedbacks. Oops. All right, so the theme is, here is the theme. Conventional understanding of the internationalization of higher education is primarily concerned with the transnational mobility of students from global south to global north or east to west, or the expansion of English language programs by emulating leading Western universities, or sometimes by adopting their programs. This has been changing. I myself was a member of a team that specifically examined the impact for qualitative and quantitative impact of intra-regional international student mobility in East Asia, but the image somehow still persists. This study, based on an ethnographic study of 3 international universities in Malaysia, explore the possibility of an alternative model of university internationalization that is suited to specific post-colonial national and regional contexts. Case study will be conducted, and it is conducted in Malaysia. And Malaysia is a former British colony that became a plural society as a result of social transformation during British colonial rule. John Furnivall, colonial administrators, classic study, colonial policy and practice defines plural society that it is a melody of peoples, different sections of the community mix but do not combine. Each group holds by its own religion, its own culture and language, its own ideas and ways. They live side by side, but separately within the same political unit. In British Malaya, plural society was formed as a result of massive influx of migrants, namely Chinese laborers, brought to work in tin mines, and Indian, mostly Tamils from the south, brought to work in rubber plantations. Plural society is thus a colonial construct. And John Furnivall also said that plural society is inherently stable. And in post-colonial, post-independence Malaysia, social stability and integration of different ethnic communities has remained a political and social priority. In a way, it is a burden. It has been a burden in terms of integration and cohesion, but a contemporary quest for diversity and multiculturalism under globalization may have changed such a view. And I chose 3 international universities with ties to local ethnic communities as an example, which I may see the localization of internationalization. And through those international universities, internationalization of local ethnic community may proceed. And those universities, the institution studies which I will introduce after this is International Islamic University and the first overseas branch of a major Chinese university, and Medical University College operated by a global higher education group headquartered in India. So they all take advantage of Malaysia's plural society, multi-ethnic social fabric to cultivate international ties and recruit students from their respective ethnic communities and beyond. And they offer programs to attract a regional population seeking high-quality international education that is sensitive to non-Western intellectual heritages, ethno-religious consciousness, and emerging regional and global economic opportunities. And are these Asian international universities just second choice destinations for those who could not make it to universities in the West? Are they substandard transnational higher education alternatives? Will they remain so? if local ethnic community embrace or in fact want international universities, what do they wish to get out of them? What do they do to their communities beyond providing education, higher education opportunities for their children? These are some of the questions I had when starting to conceptualize this project. Malaysia, the study site, is a post-colonial modern nation state emerged from the plural society context, as mentioned earlier. So here is sort of the summary. Today, Malaysia is characterized by the existence of large-scale migrant communities from different civilizations, such as the Chinese and Indian laborers migrated to the Malay world under colonial rule. As of 2020, Malaysia has a total population of 32 million people, out of which 69% Bumiputras, Malay sons of soil, Malay Malaysians, 23% Chinese, 7% Indians, and others. In terms of higher education, affirmative action policies that favor Bumiputra or Malay Malaysians in education, public sector employment, and government contracts have been implemented. So higher education access has been politicized along ethnic lines, limiting the access of non-Bumiputra students in universities, particularly public universities. However, higher education landscape in Malaysia has changed drastically since the 1990s. For this project, in fact, is for me is the first research project in West Malaysia in 30 years. Going back to Malaysia, West Malaysia, after 30 years, I am really amazed. I must say that today's Malaysian higher education scene is a world away from what I remembered 30 years ago. The country had only a handful of universities or public. Now Malaysia has more than 500 higher education institutions. The dramatic change, number one, is the expansion of private higher education. And because of that, access improved for non-Bumiputra students. But prestigious programs in public universities for non-Bumiputras are still restricted. And experts like you all here know that Malaysia is fast becoming a regional education hub. It is now a major host country of international branch campuses. StudyMalaysia.com lists 10 foreign university branch campuses, including 5 universities from UK. EduCity in Iskandar, Malaysia, near Singapore, is a good example of Malaysia's regional education hub aspiration. It's dubbed Asia's first multi-campus education city. And of course, now Malaysia is becoming a host country of international students rather than a sending country. Well, it does still send students overseas, but it's becoming a major host country of international students by setting the goal of hosting 250,000 of them by 2025. And despite pandemic, they're not really that far away from the goal. several factors make Malaysia a strategic international higher education locality, and which contribute to the regional education hub policy aspiration. I just listed some of them here. First, political stability and steady economic development. And second, I already mentioned government support for international education. And third, Malaysia is a young country where under 15, age 15 population makes up 24% of the total population, which is and probably the double the figure for Japan. Japan is a leading aging society in the world, so Malaysia is a envy of an aging East Asian nation. The surrounding area, the population is growing too. And the policy changes now promote the unity and integration. So encouraging Malaysians to have Malaysian identity. Here is one example of Satu Malaysia or One Malaysia, promoted under the former Prime Minister Najib. You saw TV commercials and songs, political unity slogans promoting One Malaysia. And overall, it is a country with ethnic diversity and religious tolerance. And it is a modern pluralist Muslim majority country with a mix of secular and religious. And it's a good option for international Muslim students. And the other change is that perception towards geographical proximity and sociocultural ties to China and India. I'm quoting a study by Sidhu and Christie, but Chinese and Indian Malaysians are considered cultural resources to strengthen commercial engagement with India and China. And diasporas may even be seen as positive cosmopolitan players useful to forge international higher education ties. Now I would briefly like to introduce three institutions. I must first tell you that they are not comparable. One is a national university, International Islamic University in Malaysia. It's a comprehensive national university. And Xiamen University in Malaysia is the first overseas branch of a leading Chinese university. It is considered international branch campus. And Manipal University College Malaysia is a much smaller private medical and dental university college. So they all differ in status, size, and orientations. However, they all leverage support and enrollment from ethnic and religious communities at home and beyond. And they also leverage pre-existing academic ties or historical legacy. How much time do I have, Simon?
As much as you need, Mayumi.
Okay.
Please,
Well, here
please.
is
Go on. Yeah.
I can go quickly fast forward the introduction part. But anyway, here is a location. And I made this map and I realized that Malaysia is a center, as you see, 2 universities in Kuala Lumpur area and Manipal in Malacca, 2 hours drive down south from central Kuala Lumpur area. And orange one here is home campus Xiamen in southern China, and Manipal in southwestern coastal area of India. I just realized they make nice triangle shape on this map. Right. Very quickly, I go over. I just quickly introduce the three institutions. International Islamic University, Malaysia, IIUM, seeks globally relevant Islamic education. By the way, it's me paying a courtesy. I couldn't find a nice photo, and I didn't want to. Of course, I don't mean to violate people's photo right, so I just took out my part. So this is how I do the. I try to be proper when visiting the campus. They seek globally relevant Islamic education in English. And they started off as a private institution because they wanted to have English and Arabic as a medium of instruction. And Islamization and internationalization are their important mission. I'm quoting the rector here: Muslim world's theory of knowledge to the world and Islamic universities' relevance. Enhancing the Islamic universities' relevant to the world is what it's doing. Looking at the international student body, it is more global rather than regional because they get students from Africa, from Middle East, like Saudi Arabia and Turkey. And they have community aspiration. They want to be a community that contribute to their own community. And they're seeking, the rector is very critical about the university rankings and seeking alternative to Western models. They do a lot of community works. And one thing I would like to mention is that there are many private international universities and in Malaysia, and just recently, Indonesia established International Islamic University, much later than Malaysia, but it was announced by Indonesia's President Joko. The second is Xiamen University, Malaysia. And I'm sure many of you have heard about this. And one of the missions, the objective is to integrate China's elements with international education through teaching in English. They officially opened February 2016. And Xiamen University home campus, home university, was established by a Singaporean Chinese, Tanka Ki, and maintained long-standing relationship with overseas Chinese business communities in Southeast Asia. And at present, the student number already exceeded 6,000, and now the new target is 10,000, 56% local, 36% mainland, others from 35 countries, including one student from my country, Japan. And one interesting feature is they accept 500 students who pass the Gaokao or China's entrance exam each year from the main campus. And they're attracted by international experiences, and in XMUM, they can pursue disciplines of their choice. They get to certificate and to transcript, both in English and in Chinese, recognized by both countries. And faculty members or more Malaysian and faculty members, since it's English based, mostly Malaysian and international, rather than coming from their home campus. Manipal University College, Malaysia, probably many people have not heard about this, or it is Manipal is a brand name in India, but it's a much smaller university, but it has a big impact. I first heard in the Netherlands that more than half of the registered doctors in Malaysia are our graduates. It may not be that many, but it depends how they count, because they had before the establishment in 1997 as Malacca Manipal Medical College, which became a university college in 2021. They had a rather long relationship. There was an India-Malaysia relationship that Malaysian students were sent to Manipal for medical training, and then they started the twinning program. And then 2021, they became university college that can award degrees. So over 10,000 Manipal graduates contributing to the Manipal healthcare sector. It's a small university college, but it has an impact and a presence on the medical landscape in Malaysia. And they have a huge dental clinic in Malacca too. And Manipal University College Malaysia is part of Manipal Academy of Higher Education, and it's managed by a global education group, and they operate in campuses they have multiple campuses in India, and they have operations, not just this one, other universities in Malaysia, Antigua in Caribbean, and in Dubai. And the group is known for effectively leveraging its brand equity and experience for international expansion. And most of its revenue now coming from international operations. And one interesting factor is it's really the changing phase for MUCM. And now it can award degrees. So instead of sending Malaysian students to India for part of the training, basic lab training or preclinical training, now Indian students can come to Malaysia for their medical degrees. As the number of international student quota, the quota for international students are still restricted in India to give more places for local students. There is a demand for overseas medical training for India students. So that is there will be an interesting flow, a reversal of former student flows. Instead of Malaysian students going to India, now the more South Asian students coming to Malaysia for medical degree. So what are the opportunities for these three institutions? They all get very high level endorsement from the Malaysian government and counterparts. Islamic University was, the establishment was announced by the former Prime Minister Mahathir. Xiamen, Malaysia was endorsed by then Prime Minister Najib and signing witness by President Xi Jinping. Manipal signing in India was attended by prime ministers of both countries. And as I mentioned, all leverage support and enrollment from ethnic and religious communities at home and beyond. And what's behind this establishment of 3 international universities, of course, is a long-standing desire for quality higher education from communal stakeholders. And they're all English medium, primarily. Its multilingualism is in Arabic and Chinese is rather, it is mostly English medium. Accepted use of English on campus. Well, it's in Malaysia, the English is very much accepted, and it's a dominant medium of instruction, and regardless of needless to say, it is a language of global business, science, and communication. So what I'm trying to say here is a plural society in the new context has a potential to offer opportunities for integration with global society. Here is my last slide. I just want to mention 2 points for further inquiries. So since this is a project in the making, I will probably have more, but I just want to quickly say the 2 points. From indigenization to internationalization, I'm quoting a paper by Lee, Wan, and Sirat, and they mentioned in their article on hybrid universities in Malaysia, they identify some of the higher education reforms as significant indigenization markers or factors, such as strong state coordination and use of national language in universities instead of English, and ethnic quotas for the entrance admission of public universities. Those may have some frictions with internationalization agendas. And I'm just wondering, well, the pluralism, I mentioned that the plural society may become a leverage for university internationalization. But are these universities producing only international Muslim, international Chinese, international Indians? They live separate lives, creating their own enclaves? Or are these universities become catalysts for integration? What about prospect for stratification as more students, more people have higher education credentials? And the second point is finding a niche in the global hegemonic construction of knowledge. The world-class indicators considered very problematic, especially by leaders in Islamic universities. The world-class indicators used in rankings favor Anglo-American universities, and the criteria are often irrelevant to efforts to improve the quality of universities in developing and emerging economies. Rather, the narrow world-class image renders them inferior and backward. So how do they create their own positions and status in the global higher education? So that is another point I would like to mention as a point for further inquiries. That's all. Thank you very much. And back to you, Simon.
And thank you, Mayumi. That was very interesting. And I think it's a new insight into Malaysia and internationalization itself, because we have here not the model of the comprehensive international university, the imagining that it's going to accommodate all cultures, all religions, all all classes on the best of days at the domestic level, and that somehow it'll be open to all comers internationally, even though it's probably stratified by the competitive factors that you mentioned, and also by income, and wealth of the people who come. Instead, we have this notion that specific communities with their own languages, own religions, own family identities can have a specifically international relationship. And of course, this breaks down the idea of universal, internationalization, and starts to give it much more grounded specificity. And maybe this is a desirable option for people to have, this capacity to relate to people outside their own country who may share their own identity. But yeah, all kinds of possibilities for stratification, inequality can arise when you have defined identity-based groups and they're arranged within a national system and operating separately on the international plane. So I think your last questions are very pertinent. But what struck me about this was that this might be one of the ways in which we can pluralize knowledge at the global level more effectively. If we can nurture non-European, non-Anglophone knowledges within particular communities with global links, then those knowledges start to gain more impact and more critical mass, if you like, more weight. And then, the question of how more plural knowledges then are joined together globally can be addressed on a more just basis. So I can see some positives and I can see some dangers, and I think you can as well. But I spent some time in Malaysia, mostly 20 years ago, and did quite a bit of work then. And I became really quite alarmed by the whole racialization of the polity and the way in which, it was a hierarchy. And I just met so many Indian and Chinese faculty who were unhappy and felt discriminated against in the research system and elsewhere. And, there was clearly a major problem with that. How is the Malaysian government handling these three different kind of pathways and types of institution? Is it effectively supporting their development? Is it supporting their development with fairness and equality of resources and status, or is it still pursuing a kind of hierarchy with the Bumiputera on top and the other two ethnic groupings below?
I think there is a hierarchy there and priority given to public universities. And now that the higher education ministry, it's really interesting to see higher education policy in Malaysia because of its a drastic change and the government's power to change the status quo almost I wouldn't say overnight, but it's a big change made in the last 30 years. And I'm really surprised by this. But then Malaysia, like Japan, although the public university became incorporations, the government has a very strong hold, maintain a very strong control over all universities, controlling concerning the establishment, even the curricula, the language. So they have a strong hold on all higher education institutions. But do they control the hierarchy? Yes. Among public universities, they handpicked, 5 top universities that receive preferential funding, especially the research funding. So it is a familiar story that's happening in the world. What is called the rich university getting more fund, and move up the rankings. And the other universities may not receive that much. Their share may be decreasing. But the private higher education is really a huge change, and it's really the paradigm shift for the Malaysia, not just higher education, but for the whole society. But then hierarchical impact is, I will have to do more to answer your question, Simon.
I'm going to bring in Lila and Chen in a minute, but I might ask you a couple more if I can, Mayumi. I guess the IIUM has good access to research opportunities and funding. I guess if Xiamen is probably largely a teaching institution. I'm not sure about Manipal. What's happening with those two? I mean, are they getting access to national research funding? Can they apply for grants and so on?
I think they are encouraging their faculty to apply for grant.
Right.
And they get the Chinese research grant as well.
Ah.
And Xiamen, they don't want to. They're not trying to build a simply teaching university. Although I was pretty impressed by their insistence on teaching quality. So they're very conscious about improving the quality of teaching all their faculty, but they want to enhance their research capacity. And Manipal is, they only recently become university college, and they are aware that they were aiming for full university status. For that, they have to increase the number of students, and they need research capacity papers, and which is more challenging because it's a medical field. They need facility, and it's expensive. And they have a way, their sister campuses in Malaysia already have university status, and they are aiming for that. And they want to enhance the research capacity of their faculty. Let's see.
One more from me, and then I'll bring in Lilan. Gender factor, position of women students, women faculty. Is it different between the three, or is it much the same?
That is one thing I would like to do an ethnographic study. I don't really have an answer, but that is something I will look into through interviews and participant observation.
Yes, it's quite a big topic, of course. Now I'm going to bring in Lilan from Osaka. Lilan, come in, please.
Good evening, Mayumi Sensei. Thank you so much for your interesting presentation. So I have the following three questions, as you can see from this chat box. So the first one is, what extent these three universities can be internationalized? Because as you mentioned, these three universities, they have somehow some cooperation with China, India. So I wonder, so they are mainly attracting a lot of students from, like you mentioned, mainland China or Indian, Turkey, something like that. So I wonder, to what extent do you think they can be like a real internationalized? And the second one is, because these three universities you mentioned in your presentation, I think somehow they are quite, at least from their name, they are quite kind of international, because the first one is called International Islamic University, and the second one is related to the Xiamen, the Chinese one. So I wonder, how about the other universities in Malaysia? Because these three universities seems like they are quite special universities there. So I wonder, how do other universities in Malaysia, how will they contribute to the plural society and internationalization of higher education? in Malaysia? And the third question is, when we talk about plural society, I think we shouldn't just focus on those international students. A more important approach would be how to retain them in Malaysia society or in this country. So I wonder what kind of policies do Malaysia government or a local government or society have to retain those kind of international talents there to achieve this plural society? Thank you so much.
Did I answer? Okay. Thank you, Lydian, for joining us, although it's late at night. First, those three universities are all international. They were established as international universities. And there are so many universities, I think close to 600. So that's why I'm personally very, very amazed. When I was in Kuala Lumpur, I lived there about 30 years ago. There are, I think, less than 10 universities there, all public. But now, out of this 500 over universities, there are quite a few of them call themselves international universities, very active in recruiting international students. And some, I'm sure, some are specialized or local. So I cannot really say they are very diverse. Other than that, I cannot really say that, but plural society is such an old colonial notion. And I just sort of recast it to analyze what's happening in Malaysia on the higher education scene. But they're not really trying to achieve. The plural society was colonial, the constructed during the colonial period. And it's not that the host society was happy, just that the migrants were brought to then British Malaya. But then it's this irony of history. The pluralism or multi-ethnicity in Malaysia become, you look at, we are in Japan, and the relative, we don't really have this multi-ethnicity, relative homogeneity in society may be an asset in terms of social cohesion, but under globalization, we need more global outreach. When we internationalize universities, we don't really have diaspora communities that have outreach. So these are the kind of an irony in history. That's what I can say. Did I answer your question? Thank you.
That was very effective response to three quite complicated questions. I thought.
Thank you so much, Mayumi Sensei.
Thank you.
Let me bring in for the last question. I think it'll be from Hans. Hans DeWitt.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, and thank you for your really interesting presentation. It is, for me, an example of how multifaceted and evolutionary internationalization is. It's not indeed, as you say in the beginning, only a movement from the global south to the global north and other aspects, but this is really what you see now in also in other parts. You mentioned Indonesia, you can say India, that are now internationalization strategy developing, which are competing with the global north. And the global north might be a little bit more worried about, instead of being very optimistic about its possibilities to attract international students and to be international in the future. But still, it's also interesting question to see, in particular with the two last cases, Xiamen and the Malipal case, what are their driving rationales to do this? Is this much more interested by the home country and the home institutions' interest in being present abroad, and therefore policy or revenue generation? Or is it also, in your view, really to establish a kind of international environment in Malaysia itself? So what are, according to you, the main driving rationales? For the first case, it's very clear. The Islamic is, Malaysia always has said, well, we want to be an Islamic alternative to going to the global north. We want to be a stable country, as you mentioned, where you can have no racism, where you cannot have all kind of instability, etc. So come to us, and then you get a very nice Islamic country. But the other two cases are a little bit different. So what is the driving rationales for them?
Thank you for the question. Not creating international environment in Malaysia, that is not their, I don't think their motives is creating a international environment, harmonious, plural, multi-ethnic society in Malaysia. But I showed the slide about shaman, and the first line is a quote from a senior faculty, which is we would like to integrate China's elements with international education through teaching in English. I think it's from the faculty point of view, I somehow believe what he says. Integrate China's education elements with international education in Malaysia through teaching in English. But shaman, I need to do more, because the first impression, have you visited the campus in Malaysia?
Yes, I have once, yeah.
It's a big university, yeah. And it has a profit side because they're building hostels for students, and it has a property investment element in there. So it makes an economic sense. That's one thing. The revenue, the economic, the creating a campus makes an economic sense too, but they get a lot of support from Malaysian Chinese community. But my first impression is that the shaman is so big, they may be creating a university rather than a branch campus. That's what I thought. But it's just my first time impression. And we will see. And about Manipal, it is a small campus, but it's a part of a huge operation, global higher education operation. And revenue, they generate revenue through their international operations rather than from their home operations. So they have this very rational motive to come to Malaysia, but it's not just that. That was my impression. There's a huge demand for because of the shortage of doctor in Malaysia, and in surrounding areas as well, there is a huge demand for quality doctors and dentists. So they see this shortage, and it's an economic opportunity, but it is something they can contribute to their region. And they acquired the Antigua, American University of Antigua in Caribbean. And they say they will address the shortage of doctors in the Americas through affordable medical education. So how you read that, it's that their explanation.
Yeah, and that would always be the interesting case. If of course, there are always different rationales, not one rationale for doing this. But in the Manipal case, I'm a little bit more suspicious that their revenue agenda is much more important than the other rationale. But in Simon, I think the soft power or the ideological dimension probably is also a strong and more than the revenue rationale. So you see that even in those three cases, you find different driving rationales for internationalizing and being present in Malaysia, which is quite interesting to see. But thank you very much for your very interesting presentation.
I will look into that. Thank you. And one thing I forgot to mention in the case of Xiamen University, they were very straightforward about contributing to Belt and Road.
Yeah.
There's a large private university sector in medicine in Malaysia. There's quite a number of good quality private universities in medical field, and some of them are doing research of note. I mean, it's an interesting subsector, and interesting to see now an Indian-specific one joining that group. Malaysia, very interesting country. I mean, it's relatively affluent. It has something of an independent reputation as a country politically on the world stage. Mahathir was part of that, I think. And of course, it's got this fundamental, ethnic fracture within its sort of built into it, and almost sustained by the constitution itself, which divides people on the basis of inverted commas race and religion, and that's I suppose one interpretation more like an apartheid state, which categorizes people according to their so-called fundamental characteristics, which perhaps aren't so fundamental. But all the same, a country which continues to throw up new ideas and do things differently, and has a relatively strong higher education system and clearly getting stronger, and a major player in internationalisation. So not easy to categorize and not easy to dismiss, I think, Malaysia. I think it's a very interesting place to do research. And we're really grateful to you, Mayumi, for opening it up for us so well. And we'd like to have more presentations on Malaysia and more contributions from Malaysian-based colleagues talking about their own country as part of our webinar series. Mayumi, we're always interested in your research. They're really grateful that you came on today. Anything you'd like to present in future, we'd be interested. So keep in touch. Colleagues, the next webinar is, of course, on Thursday this week, and it's going to be Li Mei and Xu Wen talking about, Tuesday next week, talking about returnees to China. The diaspora comes home. And the results of the 1,000 Talents program, what happens to those people? Very controversial group, of course. For some reason, the 1,000 Talents program particularly got up the nose of President Trump when he was president in the US, and is seen as a kind of affront to American science, that people would actually want to leave again, having been given the opportunity to work in America. But it'd be a good presentation by two accomplished quantitative and qualitative scholars. We look forward to seeing you on Tuesday next week. And once again, Mayumi, thank you very much. And to everyone,
thank you too.
bye for now.
Bye-bye.